Well, let's tell you about the succession of the AmaZulu throne. It continues to be a contentious issue following a ruling by the High Court in Pretoria that set aside President Cyril Ramaphosa's recognition of Prince Misuzulu, the king, as king rather. Cultural expert Professor Sihaugele Ngubane says King Misuzulu has nothing to worry about.
The application that was before the court was on the process. And I think the process needs to be left with the courts because the judgment is arguable. The lawyers can still argue about the judgment or even appeal to the Constitutional Court of the judgment. But I'm not too sure at this point that most people within the Zulu nation are aware of that the king is still on the throne.
Ngubane says the king remains on the throne, as you've just heard, as it's his birthright.
But the fact remains that he is in that position because of his birth circumstance. So I think that supersedes the court decision, because if you care to think of it, the court is there because the monarch is legislated. So the process of the courts should continue, and the king remains in his throne because of the custom and the tradition of the Zulu nation.
Another cultural expert, Professor Belindaba Velapimkize, says the court ruling is not likely to have any impact on the kingship.
I don't see anything ridiculous happening in this issue, because even the KwaZulu council will say, look, according to us, the king comes from a wife whose lobolo was paid by the nation, and therefore he qualifies. And they will revisit how was he born, and who was his mother, and also according to the tradition of the Zulus, is he a qualifying person as per that, not as per the Act of 2019? So those are the kinds of things. So as I'm sitting here at this point in time, I think this is going to take time, but I don't see anything happening in future which will change the current king to be the king.
We're now joined by Professor Musa Xulu. He's also a cultural analyst. Thank you very much, sir, for your time this afternoon. Between birthright and the courts, which reigns supreme?
Well, the Zulu kingdom is a sub-national kingdom, and therefore the process of nominating a king is legislated, and those legislated processes have to be followed to the T, to be in line with, because, kings, etc., they use state resources, etc., and therefore the issue of birthright is a different issue altogether. What's happening here is that a process of nominating the king now was flawed in 2021, because there were those who were left out of the process, who are members of the royal family, and there were those who feel that they would have nominated somebody else had they been present in those meetings. So it's a 50-50 kind of situation at the moment. What happens is that when a court of law nullifies something, that thing does not exist, cannot be operated until, for example, there's an appeal in terms of the issues of the court. Those meetings, the judge has ordered that those meetings need to be investigated into how they are constituted. And of course, eventually the issue of nominating the Zulu king rests with the royal family and no one else.
Professor
what will happen eventually?
Oh, please continue.
Yes. What will happen eventually is that the Zulu royal family, and we pray there must be a leader there, will have to sit down and look at this judgment and look at how to correct themselves in terms of the nomination processes.
What does this then suggest? Does the AmaZulu kingdom have a king at the moment in light of this judgment?
Well, the judgment is in place now in terms of recognition by President Ramaphosa, there is no recognition of King Misuzulu as at this point in time until there is an appeal. So he's not recognized by the state at this point in time until there is an appeal by both the President and King Misuzulu. And then, of course, that's a separate process. The investigation itself still has to take place to verify the validity of those two meetings on the 7th of May and on the 12th of May. And once that validity is stated, it may go either way. If the panel says the meetings were valid, then that's it. But I can foresee that if they say that, there will be appeals from the other side. And if they say the meetings were not valid, there will be appeals from Mrs. Zulu's side. So you can expect a long, protracted battle of the Zulu royal family over the throne. It may take years. But legally, King Misuzulu and President Ramaphosa have to redress by lodging appeal. Otherwise, the judgment of yesterday stands and there is no recognition in place.
Who constitutes the investigative committee?
Well, I don't know. It's up to the president, but there must be real cultural experts who know these things. Also, who know how government operates and who know the legislative processes of the country. There must also be some legal minds there that know Zulu customary law, who will be able to assist with the issues in dispute. Look, as matters stand, people just take for granted that, okay, there is a birthright and so on. If there was a birthright, there would be no need for families to come together and nominate somebody, because that somebody will just walk. These meetings are for verification and to look at many issues, cultural issues that could have been tampered with in the process of vote and so on. And you may find that as a result of maybe the way the Zulu royal family is structured now, it's going to be difficult to constitute a meeting. Secondly, it may be very difficult to come up with a candidate if the ultimate ruling is that they must start from scratch.
As a cultural expert, was his recognition flawed? Do you agree with the courts?
Well, the court, there's a slight problem here, and I think it was President Ramaphosa. There was an issue in front of Judge Madondo, which did not have much to do with the succession, but had much to do with the wills and all of those things, and attempts by Prince Misuzulu to stop the issue of coronation because he felt there were still disputes. Now, there were disputes, and those disputes were reported to President Ramaphosa. And he then referred those disputes to Zuma, who appointed a panel led by former Premier Musa Xulu. That panel recommended that the recognition should be deferred until the disputes are settled, either by the courts or by the royal family itself. But the president, what he did, he quickly did not even give those people a chance to appeal against the ruling of Judge Madondo or to pursue other means. And because they had 21 days to can appeal, but within 4 days he had jumped all guns, and then that's why the judge had a problem that he rather rushed the process of recognition during March 2022.
Professor Musa Xulu is a cultural expert and analyst. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon.